Tua Tagovailoa last year, in the 8 non-primetime games that he played, he completed 70% of his passes. He threw 20 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions and threw for 2,488 passing yards. But anytime the Miami Dolphins played in prime time, he struggled. He completed 54% of his passes for 1,060 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And his worst games were against the 49ers, the Chargers, the Bills the second time they played, and the Green Bay Packers. Against Green Bay, he threw the game away. He threw 3 interceptions, and he only threw 1 touchdown. Against the LA Chargers, the whole entire offense pretty much got clamped. The only touchdown he threw was the Tyreek Hill. If Tua Tagovailoa is going to end up being the quarterback who can get the Miami Dolphins to the Super Bowl, he has to be better in primetime games against quality teams. Last year, the best performance he had against a playoff team was earlier in the season against the Baltimore Ravens when he threw 6 touchdowns. Tua Tagovailoa hasn't really been known as being a quarterback who elevates his game in big moments. Even going back to early in his career when they had Brian Flores as the head coach, in big moments of games, they took Tua out and they put in Ryan Fitzmagic. Tua still has a lot of improvement that he needs to make if we're going to consider the Miami Dolphins Super Bowl contenders. Right now, the Dolphins are a playoff caliber football team, but I can't say this team is equipped to win a Super Bowl when you have a quarterback who every time he gets in the limelight, who melts. Tua has to be better in these big games. And you can make all the excuses you want to if you're a Dolphins fan. If you want to blame the offensive line, okay, but your offensive line still hasn't really been all that much improved over the course of this offseason. You can make all the excuses. You can put the blame on Mike McDaniel, whoever, but eventually you're going to have to look at Tua and you're going to have to ask yourself, hey, is this the guy who can get us to the next level? And I was somebody who was a big defender of Tua Tagovailoa, and I still defend Tua a lot. But after watching last year what Tua did against playoff caliber football teams in the second half of the season, I started to understand why the Miami Dolphins were kind of flirting with the idea of trading for Deshaun Watson or upgrading at quarterback. Tua Tagovailoa may be another version of Kirk Cousins. He's good when you're not watching him in prime time, but when the lights get bright and the stage gets big and palms get sweaty and chests get tight, he folds. I can't remember too many times when Tua Tagovailoa actually came big in big moments of games that actually mattered. I would have loved to see him in the wild card game when they lost to the Buffalo Bills. At least Skylar Thompson put the Dolphins in a position to win that game, albeit it was because the defense carried. But Skylar Thompson still made enough plays for the Dolphins to have a shot at winning that game. And if Tua would have played, maybe the Dolphins potentially could have beaten the Buffalo Bills in the first round, but you never know. Because every time Tua played in the primetime game last year, he didn't really show up. Against the LA Chargers, he completed 35.7% of his passes. He was 10 out of 28 passing for 145 passing yards. He was averaging 5.2 yards per pass. Now, Mike McDaniel does deserve a good amount in the game for the Miami Dolphins' shortcomings in those losses. They got one-dimensional. They couldn't run the football. And there's been plenty of occasions last year where you can go back and watch the Miami Dolphins and you can say, bro, what the hell happened to the run game? What the hell happened to playing complementary style football? It just seemed like at times Mike McDaniel just got trigger happy and he just wanted to throw the football 50, 40 times a game. It's like, you ever play Madden and you play somebody online and they stop the run game early and then you just say, F it, I'm going to just throw the football. I'm going to just air it out. That's kind of what the Miami Dolphins did at times last year. And when you go back and you look at most of their losses, they didn't really put a lot of emphasis on trying to get the run game going. And it's not like they didn't have talent at running back. Like Raheem Mostert, when they had him going, he was a pretty good running back, especially after contact. But it just seems like at times, Mike McDaniel, even though he comes from that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, seems to forget that you can call run plays. And it's a little bit odd because a staple of that Kyle Shanahan offense is running the football. So for Mike McDaniel this year, when the Miami Dolphins have to play the New York Jets in prime time, when they got to play the Buffalo Bills, or hell, even the New England Patriots, he's going to have to find a way to be more balanced on offense. And I'm not going to put all of Tua's struggles on him because coaching does play a part in this. A good head coach puts his players in situations to succeed. And oftentimes, when you watch the Miami Dolphins play last year, they never really had a counterpunch. They were a one-trick pony at times. If you could stop them from generating all of the big explosive plays with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, you pretty much cracked the code to their offense. Go and look at the Miami Dolphins 2022 player stats for last year. You look at the stats, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill made up the majority of the passing yardage. You got to be able to be less predictable. Everybody knew where the ball was going to the majority of the times when the Miami Dolphins decided to air it out. It was either going to one or two players, Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill. And that was it. His offense got really predictable, and I think that was a large reason why the Miami Dolphins, after the second half of the season, started to crash back down to earth. I even made a video after they lost to the LA Chargers. I said, what the hell happened to the Miami Dolphins offense? At one point last season, Tua Tagovailoa was an MVP candidate. And then the second half of the year, dude just completely fell off the rails. The offensive line doesn't look like it's going to make too many giant leaps in improvement. Maybe the coaching staff is really sold on the fact that they can coach these guys up and get them playing at a better level and they can develop them. So if the coaches feel that way, then you can't really use the offensive line as an excuse because the coaching staff has enough confidence that they feel that they can get this offensive line playing at a good enough level that they can win a Super Bowl. They went out and traded for Jalen Ramsey when they could have went out and acquired the offensive lineman. They could have got Jonah Williams. He was the left tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals last year. He's moving to right tackle this year. According to some reports out there, he was on the trade block. And yet there were no rumors about the Miami Dolphins reaching out to acquire him. For Tua Tagovailoa, he has to be able to perform better in these big primetime games. Eventually, if Tua is going to be viewed as the legitimate franchise quarterback for this franchise, he has to be able to perform better when the lights are the brightest, because that's what separates the great quarterbacks in this game versus the average quarterbacks in this game. When you think about Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson even, the best quarterbacks in this league, what do they all have in common? They step up in big games. Meanwhile, when you look at the quarterbacks who we consider to be average, such as Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott, what do they do in big games? Oftentimes, they come up short. And Tua, I kind of think he fits in that Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott category. And if you want to say, well, JT, Tua was a top 10 quarterback last year, I mean, okay, but he's still in that same category. I mean, the dude didn't really have too many good big games against quality playoff caliber football teams outside of the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills early in the season. Late in the season, when people started to crack the code to this Miami Dolphins offense, Tua got bottled up and he shriveled, and he ended up coming up small when he needed to come up big in big moments. Against the Green Bay Packers, the dude, low-key, sold the game for the Miami Dolphins. He was AKA Tua turning the ball over. Same thing against the Buffalo Bills. Tua was a top 5, top 10 pick when he ended up getting drafted in the same class as Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. And if you were to ask Mike McDaniel, who would he rather have, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, or Tua? I'm pretty sure he would take those other two quarterbacks over Tua in a heartbeat, because those two quarterbacks have been able to step up in big moments. And you can say, well, Justin Herbert folded against the Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs. Okay, but for the most part, he carried the Chargers to the postseason because they were banged up for the majority of the 2022 season. Tua has to be better in these big time games. This dude has been incredibly underwhelming anytime he gets put in primetime matchups. Against the 49ers, I understood they had one of the best defenses in the NFL, but I don't really think anybody expected Tua to have the kind of performance that he put on display. Against the LA Chargers, the dude only completed 10 out of 28 passes. He was averaging 5.2 yards per pass. Like, the Miami Dolphins have to develop a counterpunch. You ever played UFC and you ever went against one of your homeboys who doesn't really know how to do anything but just button mash? That's kind of what the Miami Dolphins did at times. Like, anytime they got in a pinch, they kept on doing the same thing. Every time they were down at halftime, they came out and never really looked like they made any adjustments. Tua Tagovailoa has to be better in big games, but also Mike McDaniel and his coaching staff have to be better at making adjustments. They were too one-dimensional at times last season. No run game, and they were too overly reliant on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to run their offense through. And I'm not trying to say this to hate on Tua. I'm not a Tua hater. You guys know I love Tua. I've been going to bat for Tua ever since he first got drafted by the Dolphins. But I am starting to realize a lot of the knocks that people had on Tua, and it's starting to come to fruition. And I saw this stat on Twitter, of all places. I never thought that I would see some reasonable statistics against Tua on Twitter. Like, Twitter is one of the worst places to find good arguments. But this was a pretty good one that somebody threw at me when I was trying to come to the defense of Tua Tagovailoa. They was like, man, have you seen what Tua does in big games, JT? The dude in big games has 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And in non-primetime games, he has 20 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. What does that tell you about Tua? That was a pretty good point. So I'm hoping that Tua and the Miami Dolphins offense perform a lot better in primetime games this year. Because last year, anytime they played in a big game, they melted.